Your tooth is rotting in your jaw. The pain pulses with every heartbeat. There is no pharmacy down the street, no anesthesia, no emergency room waiting to numb the ache and send you home. For most of human history, this wasn't a hypothetical. This was a Tuesday. Today you reach for a small plastic bottle, swallow 2 tablets, and feel relief within 20 minutes. For roughly 300,000 years, your ancestors had no such luxury. So what did they do when pain became unbearable, and there was nowhere to turn but the world around them? The answer is stranger, smarter, and more painful than you'd expect. Let's start with the skull. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of ancient skulls, with neat, deliberate holes cut or scraped into them. This procedure is called trepanation, the act of removing a section of bone from a living human skull using nothing but sharpened stone, obsidian, or shell. It sounds like torture. In a remarkable number of cases, it was treatment. Paleopathologist John Verano has spent decades studying trepan skulls from ancient Peru, where the practice appears again and again across pre-Inca and Inca burial sites. His research uncovered something that should not have been possible if these were random acts of violence. The bone surrounding many of these holes had healed. Smooth, rounded edges, new growth at the rim, laid down slowly over months and years. That means the patient survived. Not just survived the surgery itself, but lived on afterward, sometimes for decades. Why would anyone cut into a living skull on purpose? The leading explanation points to severe head trauma, chronic seizures, or unbearable migraines. Ancient healers likely believed that opening the skull released trapped pressure, built up blood, or even evil spirits causing the pain. Crude as that sounds, the underlying instinct wasn't entirely wrong. In real cases of skull fracture or brain swelling, relieving pressure can genuinely save a life, which is exactly what modern neurosurgeons still do today. Just with sterile tools and imaging scans instead of a sharpened stone. Verano's research found survival rates as high as 80% at some Peruvian sites. For comparison, skull surgery performed by trained European doctors during the American Civil War, thousands of years later, had a survival rate closer to 50%. Let that sink in for a moment. A surgeon working with stone tools and no understanding of infection outpaced 19th century battlefield medicine. Pain wasn't only treated with a blade, though. Sometimes it was treated with bark. Open the Ebers Papyrus, an Egyptian medical text dating back to roughly 1550 BCE, and you'll find one of the oldest written pharmacies on Earth. Tucked among its hundreds of remedies is a recurring ingredient: willow bark, chewed raw or brewed into a bitter tea to dull pain and bring down fever. Willow bark contains a compound called salicin. Inside your body, salicin converts into salicylic acid, the same active compound at the heart of modern aspirin. Centuries later, the Greek physician Hippocrates documented the very same remedy, recommending willow leaf tea specifically for pain during childbirth. Two civilizations, separated by geography and centuries, independently arrived at a working painkiller long before anyone understood the chemistry hiding inside it. How many generations of trial and error does it take to land on the right tree? Picture the scene for a moment. A woman in labor inside a mud brick room, the air thick with heat. A healer crushes dried willow bark into a clay cup of hot water, the bitter steam rising between contractions. The woman drinks it slowly, her hands gripping a woven mat, while an attendant presses a damp cloth against her forehead. There is no monitor beeping nearby, no epidural waiting in a steel cart. Just bark, water, and knowledge passed down through generations of women who survived the same moment before her. Then quiet. Not silence. The room is still full of sound. But something in her shoulders drops. The healer watches her face, looking for the sign they have seen before. That slight loosening around the eyes when the worst of the wave passes. It worked well enough that the remedy survived for over 3,000 years, eventually finding its way into a chemist's laboratory and onto your bathroom shelf. But maybe the strangest discovery of all doesn't come from a written text. It comes from a frozen body found in the Alps. In 1991, hikers stumbled across the preserved remains of a man who died roughly 500-300 years ago. Researchers named him Otzi. His body had been locked in ice for so long that scientists could examine his skin. His stomach contents, even the condition of his joints, almost as if he had died the week before. What they found on his skin surprised everyone. 61 tattoos, made by rubbing soot into small cuts. Not decorative symbols, not images of animals or spirits, just simple lines and dots, clustered around his lower back, his knees, and his ankles. It is worth noting up front that what follows is a hypothesis still under debate, not a conclusion the scientific community has settled. Researcher Leopold Dorfer noticed something strange when he mapped their exact locations. The tattoos lined up almost precisely with known acupuncture points used in traditional Chinese medicine, a system that wasn't supposed to be written down for another 2,000 years. X-rays of Otzi's joints later revealed arthritis in those exact spots. Worn cartilage. Degeneration consistent with chronic nagging pain. Could a Copper Age man living in the Alps have stumbled onto the same pain relief principle that would later be formalized on the opposite side of the world? Nobody can say for certain, but the placement is precise enough that it is hard to dismiss as coincidence. Even earlier than that, the evidence gets murkier, but no less fascinating. At Shanidar Cave in present-day Iraq, archaeologist Ralph Selecki uncovered Neanderthal remains buried alongside clusters of plant pollen, including species still used today for their medicinal properties, like yarrow and chamomile. The interpretation has been debated for decades, with some researchers arguing the pollen may have blown in naturally or been carried by burrowing rodents. Still, the remains themselves tell an unmistakable story. One skeleton, known as Shanidar Fiend, had suffered a crushing blow to his left eye socket, likely leaving him partially blind. His right arm had withered from the shoulder down, probably from childhood. He walked with a limp, and yet the bones show he survived for decades past these injuries, which means someone fed him when he could not forage. Someone tended wounds he could not reach himself. Someone stayed. We do not know who. We only know they did not leave. Someone fed him. Someone helped him survive pain that should have killed him. This is the pattern that keeps surfacing once you start looking closely. Pain relief was never an afterthought in ancient life. It was a constant, ongoing project, refined through observation, repetition, and devastating trial and error, then carried forward because it actually worked. Here is the counterintuitive twist. We tend to picture prehistoric medicine as crude superstition, a shaman waving a stick over a suffering patient and hoping for the best. The evidence tells a very different story. Skull surgery with survival rates that rivaled or beat 19th century operating rooms. A plant-based painkiller, so effective it is still sitting in your medicine cabinet today, just wearing a different label. A tattoo map that may have anticipated acupuncture by thousands of years. Ancient humans weren't guessing in the dark. They were running an unbroken, multi-thousand-year experiment. With no control group, no peer review, and unbearable stakes for getting it wrong. And in some ways, surprisingly little has changed. You still reach for a chemical compound first discovered hiding inside tree bark. You still live in a world wrestling with how to manage pain responsibly, where opioids derived from the poppy plant, first cultivated by Sumerians thousands of years ago and recorded in cuneiform tablets as the joy plant, now sit at the center of a modern public health crisis. The tools have changed almost beyond recognition. The underlying problem, a body in pain searching for relief, has not changed at all. Your ancestors didn't have pharmacies, anesthesia, imaging machines, or peer-reviewed journals. What they had was attention, careful and repeated observation of what reduced suffering and what didn't, tested again and again on real bodies, with real consequences for failure. The tooth in your jaw is still rotting, but somewhere, thousands of years ago, someone is already chewing on bark, searching for the same answer you are. And here is the question worth sitting with. 5,000 years from now, what will future humans make of us? Will they look back at opioid prescriptions the way we look at trepanation? A rough solution, well-intentioned, doing its best with the tools available. The methods change. The impulse never does. Every generation inherits the same broken body and has to start again.